Hi, this is Kaery with Kaery Concealed in the Active Self-Protection Extra channel, and today this is part 2 of what I review every 2 years. So when we come back, we're going to talk about how I review the curriculum that I teach and the gear that I take with me, as well as anything I use at the range and that sort of thing. So we're going to talk about the process I go through to do that when we come back.
Lucky Gunner is my recommended trusted provider of freedom seeds for range or defensive use. In stock, good prices, and rocket fast shipping are why I go back again and again. Because of new guidelines, I can't link their site or say it, but you're smart and you can find it with a simple Google search. Stick it to the man by paying them a visit today.
All right, so the first thing I wanted to share is I learned there's a very big difference between teaching in your local area or in your region where you can drive and take all your stuff with you that you want. For years, that's how I taught. I taught in the Pacific Northwest, around the Pacific Northwest, and I could take my stuff with me, and pretty much anything I wanted to put in the car, although I did teach in Canada twice, and I had to be a little careful about the stuff I took there, but it all worked out well. I could still take a lot of stuff with me. When I fly, that isn't necessarily the case, and because I live in the northwest corner of our country, not the extreme northwest corner, but close, heavy bags cost a lot of money, and there's taxing on my physical resources as well. When I'm taking enough gear, or so much gear that it weighs more than I do, or 2 or 3 times what I weigh, that can be very taxing and tiring. So I try to streamline what I take and take only what I need to take. So the very first thing I do is I evaluate my curriculum. I do evaluate a class after every class I teach. So even if I'm teaching at a conference, let's say, where I'm teaching 3 sections of the same class, I still will sit down and at the end of that class, and I will review what went well, what didn't go well, any changes I might need to make for the next class. And then I also usually get input from any AIs or RSOs I had with me, co-instructors, and then I also review the student post-course evaluations that I hand out, then I collect them at the end. No student information is gathered or anything, just what did they think of the course, what were their big takeaways, that sort of thing. And then so I do evaluate those, but I do like to collect all of that data and information and review them comprehensively every 2 years. Doing that allows me to make sure that I'm doing a good job. It allows me to see if I need to change some things or not. One of the things that I found, so I just did this process over the last 2 weeks, which is why I'm talking about it today, because it's fresh on my mind. But I look at each course individually, and one of the things I identified in particular about the precision pistol course, the student course that we teach, is I realized that there was a major curriculum change I made to that 2 years ago. And it's obvious that change was made. And I suspected it, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I didn't take the time to look for it, but I should have. But there's one thing that we do in that class, or we used to do every time we taught it, and it's time intensive. It takes a lot of time. When we teach just the 4-hour, the half-day sniper pistol course, this one exercise we do takes about 40 minutes, and it can be really frustrating for people. But I've noticed, and I especially noticed when I reviewed all of the student pictures and student group sizes and things like that, I noticed a huge, huge decrease in student performance after that one exercise was removed from the curriculum. So now I have to make a decision. The group sizes are still absolutely acceptable. There's still big changes happening for people. They're still learning to make the changes that they need to make, and they're learning to self-correct and self-identify where issues are and make those changes on their own by the time they leave the course, and that's what my hope is for them. So the question is, what do I do now? Do I need to put that back in? I don't think I do, but I still want to spend some time thinking about it. And so that's an example of something that I look for. Another thing I look for is there anything I need to remove from the course? Is there anything that just it doesn't need to be there anymore? Is there anything that I'm covering that is, this sounds really dramatic, I don't mean it to be this dramatic, but I try to think about it so I'm only doing the essential things, especially when I teach just a 3 or 4 hour block of a 1-day course. Is there anything that they could die, that someone could die if I don't teach that part of it, or if I change that part of it. That helps me get down to the nitty-gritty. I'm not saying I only teach things that keep people from dying, because that is not the case at all. I don't mean that. But it helps me to get that, dramatic isn't the right word, but anyway, to get that granular, that thoughtful about it, and make sure that I am covering the essential information. So is there anything I can remove? Is there anything I need to add? Is there any terminology I need to update? And I have a lot of terminology I need to update from 2 and 3 of the courses I teach. After taking the Advanced Force Science Specialist course, I understand the study so much more in human performance factors, so much more deeply than I ever did before taking the course at the end of last year. And so I do want to make some terminology changes and updates, not because I want people to use that terminology, but I want to add a phrase here or there so that people can become familiar with those of the terms that are currently used. I also like to review all of the student post-course surveys and just see if there's any common threads that students identify. And I definitely like to look at targets, the targets that I use for each class, and see if they're still working. And an example of that would be, I used to, when I would teach sniper pistol locally or around the country, I used to use a lot of these stick-on mailing labels. You can get them in a bunch of different colors. I learned about these from Dave Spalding, and they're adhesive and they're great. I cut them in half. I also used even the 1-inch target pasters, and then also some of the circle stickers that you can buy. And sometimes we just drew circles with Sharpies and things like that. And that worked great for students. I also would take printed copies of 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. So for example, just this section right here, that fits on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I would take just stacks of those with me. That works as well. About 2 years ago now, I thought that it might be easier. It was taking a little bit of time. If I only can teach a 2.5-hour block of sniper pistol, for example, it takes a little bit of time for us to do an arts and crafts project and get the cardboard target backer out for people to put their stickers where they need to be and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, I'll streamline it then and I'll just get some big targets made. I didn't realize how expensive it is to get big targets made, and I also didn't realize how heavy they are to carry with me when I travel. So I think I will be switching, once I use these up, I will probably be switching back to arts and crafts again with the learners too. And the students actually really enjoy using these and the stickers, and they kind of like making their own targets. One of the things I know was helpful too is several students would go and they would take off one of the stickers, and they could take that with them or put that in their notes and see that, if I had 5 shots that were all touching, that sort of thing. So that was kind of a handy thing. I know they can cut it out of the paper as well, but that's an example. I just evaluate the target. Is there anything I need to change about it? Anything I need to do differently? Not usually as dramatically as, go back to arts and crafts or something, but I do look for some things that I can change and what can I do to improve the student experience with the target, that sort of thing. I also look at the handouts that I use in the courses when I teach. Handouts, posters, that sort of thing. So we, a couple years ago, started using the DFUS poster, the Direction, Finger, Unload, and Secure for the firearm safety rules. I still plan on taking that and using that still. That allows me to go through the firearm safety rules a little more efficiently, and I don't get as sidetracked as easily. I think that's better for students, and I love seeing people take pictures of it because I know now they have a copy of those in a photo in their phone as well. And if you want the DFUS poster, I'm happy to send it to you. Just send me an email and I will send you a PDF of it that you can have printed as big as you want to make it. One thing that I use for sniper pistol that I need to change, I realized, is after my review this last week, is precision shooting. We talk about the difference between accuracy shooting and precision shooting. And one of the things I need to do is I need to move this group out of the center, because we have a lot of folks that come to the course without their pistol zeroed. And not for some reason, I understand why, but folks will often have a hard time understanding that we don't have time in a 2.5, 3-hour, 4-hour class to zero everybody's gun before we start. And so that's an easy change, even if their group is over here, but they still have a nice tight group, or if it's over here, they have a nice tight group, whatever. It's still awesome that they have a nice tight group, and that's what counts. And so I just need to make a little bit different poster. I enjoy using posters for just as reminders. I don't want to use stuff that doesn't have to be used. And by poster, I just mean a little display to put up. But this year's one that I started using very early, like the Amish. Hopefully that's not offensive to anyone. And I learned that from Mr. Bucky in Ohio. And I love this term. We talk about, we just want to get our hands joined together quickly. So we want to marry our hands together early. I like talking about double pinky power activate. These are the Wonder Twins. And remember in the, was it 90s? They had Wonder Twin powers activate, and they'd link their pinkies together and they could say what they wanted to turn into. So we talk about double pinky power activate. But I like having visuals for my students, and these are super easy to take with me. They're, small. They just stack them, packs up like this, and they're laminated, and I can just use this push pin or some tape and put them up around the little area that I'm teaching in and take them down that night. So those have been effective. I also review the things I take with, oh no, sorry, I'm not to that one yet. Sorry, we're looking at curriculum, how to review curriculum. Boy, I almost jumped way ahead. Sorry about that. I also update the course evolution for each course. So this right here is the course evolution for sniper pistol. And on one side of the page, it has the topic, and then who I learned it from, when I learned it, what book I read it in, what have you. And I started doing this 4 or 5 years ago now, when I was accused of, I won't go into the details of it because it really isn't relevant, but it was just shocking to me. I try to give, if I know where it came from, I absolutely tell people where it came from. Like I've said before, there's nothing new under the sun to me. I've learned everything I know I've learned from someone somewhere. And so Miss Steph encouraged me. She said, well, what if, do you know where you learned all the different things you teach? I was like, oh yeah. I mean, it might take me a while to think of it, but yeah, I pretty much do. There are a few things I don't, probably because I've learned them from more than one person. But for the most part, yes, I know where I first heard them from, all the way back to my childhood, especially things about shooting. And so I just decided to write it all down. So for each course I teach, whether it's a 2-hour seminar or a 3-day instructor course, I write down what I'm going to be covering and how I learned about those topics. That, to me, gives me, credibility isn't the right word, but I just don't ever want anybody to think I'm trying to plagiarize somebody or steal somebody's ideas or what have you. I am happy to share with you where I learned them, and I do try to say them in my classes. My curriculum even has, my written curriculum even includes, where I learned them from. So anyway, I like to update my course evolution for each course so that I know, okay, and I'm going to add some things. Like I just had Mr. Riley's Pistol IQ class again a couple weeks ago, and there's a way that he describes a certain action that we do visually, and I love how he describes it. So I will be adding that to my course evolution for sniper pistol and to my curriculum as well. So that's how I evaluate my curriculum. And the next thing I just want to make sure I cover that. The next thing I evaluate is my prep, my notes, my written notes. So my goal has always been to have a version of my curriculum of any course I teach that I could hand to someone else, not that anybody else would want to teach it, and not that I would ever expect anybody to teach it the way I teach it. But I have been to places and I've had situations where an instructor that was going to be teaching ended up being sick, and the students were planning on having that instructor's course and they couldn't. And I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if that instructor had their material written, not so that the person filling in for them would teach their material, but might be able to see how there are similarities between them, because they could share those things with the students. I was thinking maybe that would help the students not be as disappointed or what have you. I also love being able to hand anybody that's assistant instructing for me, or even RSO, I love handing them the curriculum so they can see it and they know where we're going and what direction we're going to. So I like to evaluate my curriculum or evaluate the written curriculum. And I usually, one of the other reasons I wanted to have a written version of my curriculum is so I can review it a week before, like a month before I teach it, a week before I teach it, and the night before. And so I don't ever read all of this to my students at all, ever. But I do have notes in there of things that will remind me, or it reminds me of the course flow. And so I like to review my written curriculum and make sure that everything that's in it is what I'm still currently teaching. And sometimes I add sticky notes all over the place to different things I want to emphasize for that particular course or what have you. The biggest thing I use is the course, the overall flow for the course. This is the thing I usually keep in my pocket and refer back to. And I just use the same one for each one, but it just kind of has the topics we're going to cover in that course and maybe a reference to what page, if it's a direct quote I want to read or something like that. And I also like to put stickers on the front of my notebooks, something I particularly have been working on. So one of the things I've been working on is after doing the methods of instruction course and understanding the terminology for feedback, when to give feedback, how to give feedback to learners, I know that I tend to give too much feedback and not at good times. And so I challenge myself to give feedback or corrections or input to students in 10 words or less, and only after they've had a few minutes to process, and I mean individual feedback, only after they've had a few minutes to process whatever it is that we were doing. So I don't want to interrupt their process time. I just want to give them feedback after they've had a chance to process it, but to do it quickly and briefly. And so then another thing I wanted to remind myself is what Dr. Lewinsky said earlier this year, is that giving people the courage to be imperfect in the learning process. We have to do that because it's the best learning tool, because making mistakes is the best way to learn. And so those are the things I want to be reminded of that I put to the cover. So I might change these out every 2 years or even sooner than that, but not usually. Usually I change these out every 2 years, unless there's something dramatic. So what some people will ask me, oh, I would love to have what's in your notebook. I don't know that people would love to have what's in my notebook because I don't think it would make sense to anybody else, which is not good or bad, it just is. What's in my notebook is literally just the written curriculum. And again, I don't read it while I'm teaching. I already know what it is, but it just reminds me of the overall course flow. The one thing I do look at is, I just call it the course at a glance. That I do look at while I'm teaching, just to make sure I'm staying on track, because I tend to follow rabbits and squirrels and things like that. But I also usually print a cardstock version of that that's a little bit bigger, that is usually 3 pages, and then I can just slip that in my pocket. And then I don't have to have the notebook with me when I'm out teaching on the range. So, and I can hand this to someone else. So students ask if they can take pictures of it sometime, which I'm happy to let them take pictures of it. I don't have anything to hide there. And anyway, so that's basically how I do a completed course. So a course that I have created the curriculum for it, I've taught it several times, and it's like I am happy with it, then I will put it in a book. And I just shrink the page size so it'll fit in the book and paste it into these pages. And I like these books because it's a sewn-in binding. I've had people ask me that all the time, so that's the only reason I'm sharing it with you, in case you're wondering, but it's a sewn-in binding, and so the pages don't fall out, which is really handy. When I'm still developing a course, I use half sheets of paper that I can easily rearrange the Post-it notes. So I use Post-it notes that I can easily take off and put in a different page to arrange it differently if I want to. So if you ever see me with the, stuff like this, that's because I'm still piloting that course. I still want to teach it a few more times before I'm completely happy with it and ready to consider it a good solid course, getting the results that I'd like it to get. So that's how I look at my curriculum. So that's the difference between the written versions I have. I don't feel like it's necessary for every instructor to have their curriculum written down to this degree. For me, what's written here is the rationale behind why I teach what I teach in these 2 courses in particular. And I taught for years without having it written like this. And everything was fine and great, not a problem at all. What I found is that for me personally, I feel like having a written version and a rationale, my understanding, the why I'm covering any section I'm covering, allows me so much more flexibility. I don't often even need to refer back to it, but the fact that I have it there and can remind myself of it, for me, gives me a lot of flexibility. I can punt no problem. I don't have to have my notebook. I can teach without my notebook. There are just times when there's a particular quote, like a student will ask a question and there's a particular quote that I feel will just nail the answer to that for them better than my long-winded way of saying it. And I like to have that to be able to share that with them. But I don't think every instructor has to have their curriculum written down like this. Lots of people don't do that. I've seen lots of instructors that have just a little 3x5 notebook card with the basic principles, and I do that too. That works great. That's what I feel like my little cardstock thingies are, just with the course flow. Here's the topic. These are the few things we're going to cover in that particular topic, and that's it. Anything like that works. Whatever works for you is great. I would love it if you shared in the comments below what your process is. If you're an instructor, do you have, of any kind, if you teach anything, do you have a written curriculum? Do you have just some notes that you work off of? How do you access the information you teach? All right, and the last thing I do when I evaluate my teaching is everything I haul around, I want to make sure I have a reason for hauling it around. So I really don't want to have to buy stuff when I land somewhere, like having to go buy Sharpies and things like that. That can get expensive and time consuming. So I do evaluate each piece that I take with me and make sure that it needs to come with me. So and I also look, are there things that I lose regularly? So I used to lose Sharpies all the time, and I found that odd shaped Sharpies work well. People don't tend to walk off with them, although I'm seeing a lot more people show up in classes like this. I try to put a label around mine so they don't walk away. I use different color Sharpies because, especially for sniper pistol, we circle our groups in different colors between the group we shoot at the different yards and then at different times. So anyway, geez, so that was a laser pointer. So anyway, Sharpies are handy. Laser pointers are something I just added recently. And these are so we can have visual go signals for students. So rather than the beeper or the timer, or rather than me saying go or up or you're released to your task, we can have different people that point at the target, and we'll have different color of lasers, and this color means one thing and this color means something else, because most likely it's going to be a visual signal that we'll be responding to in a life or death situation. Last year I started taking rulers with me. I always try to think of things that will expand the students, or not expand, that will make it a better experience for the students, and rulers is definitely one of them. I love them being able to actually measure the actual size, for a sniper pistol, for example, measure the actual size of their groups so that they can write on their target, my starting size was this and my ending size is this. That's been a lot of fun for them to be able to do. So I just take these. I encourage them to take them home. These are really cheap on Amazon, but that works very, very well. And I started carrying 2 years ago a speaker with me on the range because I lose my voice after 3 days or 4 days of teaching all day. And so this has a little microphone that you put over your ear, and this works very, very well. This has been a good thing. So I plan on continuing bringing this with me. I also love the little sights. I know a lot of you have seen these before. There's only certain classes I need to talk about these things in, but I like having the red dot option as well, so we can talk about how much the dot moves in the window and how does it move. And then these have been really helpful. This type has been really helpful for explaining, I even do it like that sometimes, for having the student explain to me what their sights are doing. There's a portion of sniper pistol where we talk about aiming and the role of our mind while we're aiming, that sort of thing. And so students are able to use these to describe to me what the sights are actually doing on their pistol. So those have been really handy. And the dynamometer is no longer making the cut. This thing's heavy and I don't need it on the road. It was fun to have for a while and people enjoyed it, but it's heavy. And so this will be staying home with me. And I think that's about it as far as gear that I take with me. But I do like to review it every year just to make sure there isn't anything in particular, or not every year, every 2 years, and think about it deeply and make sure that I'm not taking any extra stuff with me so I don't have extra weight, that sort of thing. So what kind of review process do you have for the gear you take with you? Maybe even the gear you take with you when you attend classes as a student or when you teach. I know a lot of people are able to drive to the classes they teach and the classes they take, which is wonderful. Probably the classes I take, easily 95% of the time I have to fly to be able to take courses. And so I'm carrying gear with me when I go to do that. Anyway, we'd love to hear from you. Hopefully this has been helpful and we look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.